Rex has been through a lot.
Oh, really? Rex has been through a lot? I hadn't noticed. I didn't even know. Welcome back to Rebels Revisited. That intro, that's what, plays in my head every time I hear that line. Rex has been through a lot. Tell me something I don't know. Anyway, this is going to be a fun episode now that I'm neck deep in my clone crisis. In case you're not aware of the clone crisis, it all started at the end of June when I watched Relics of the Old Republic and the Lost Commanders along with Shattered and Victory and Death, and entered into a perpetual state of being in a crisis over the concept of clones. The clones have been living in my head rent-free for months, and it's just me crying over clones over here, and it will never end. Clone crisis hours. And it will be my legacy. I'm going to drag you all down with me. One day, when you see posts about clones, you will immediately think of me. When Bad Batch drops, I will have everyone saying Clone Crisis Hours. I am literally going to rope everyone into this. So anyway, this is gonna be great. Here we go. This is The Last Battle Revisited. This episode sees Rex, Ezra, Kanan, and Zeb visiting Agamar, where they can find ammunition and artillery from the wreckage of a Clone Wars battle. You may or may not remember Agamar being mentioned in the Clone Wars at the end of the Onderon arc, when Dooku ordered General Kalani and his troops to relocate to Agamar. Wonder what became of them? Okay, but actually, this is one thing that makes Rebels so cool. It can just pick up a random hanging thread from the Clone Wars and continue the story. Kalani relocating to Agamar was so small and inconsequential, and Rebels didn't have to pick up that plot line to tell this story, but they did. The writers were like, there's an untold story left somewhere in the Clone Wars, and we can continue it right now. I honestly never would have wondered, what became of that tactical droid? But there's actually a whole story there, and Rebels gets to tell that story. This is also a strength of the show's largely sharing creative teams. Bosco Ang directed this one, and he also directed the episode of the Clone Wars where Agamar was mentioned. So there are a bunch of different people who have their own little details and loose ends that they're aware of, and that leads to great storytelling and cohesion. But we haven't quite reached General Kalani yet. First, let's have a couple conversations about Kanan and Rex. In just the first minute and a half of this episode, there's a lot of interesting stuff we see with Rex and Kanan. I'm usually impressed by what the creative team is able to do with 22 minutes, but there are some episodes that are just wow. There are certain episodes where the minutes are really used carefully and deliberately, and a lot is able to be shown in a small amount of time. This is for sure one of those episodes to me. It's not much of a surprise because I think Bosco Ang is a great director and honestly one of my favorites on the Star Wars animation team, but yeah, there's some really great storytelling going on here. So, Rex. This episode is one of my favorite glimpses we get of Rex out of both of the shows he's in, because this is where we get to see how the war affected him after the fact. That obviously couldn't be done in the Clone Wars, but it's at the heart of this episode, and that's established from the get-go. One thing we see within this first minute and a half is similar to what we've already seen, where Rex is telling war stories to Ezra and Zeb and answering questions since they did not experience the war. He laughs a bit about how some clones kept count of the droids they blasted, and tells of how they referred to droids as clankers. And I love that Zeb likes the term clanker, because whenever I rewatch the Clone Wars, I always think that term has Zeb energy, same energy as Zeb and Bucketheads, so it's very validating that he likes the term clankers. But this isn't exactly the same as before, because when Rex tells his war stories here, he isn't reveling in his glory days. This time, he comes across as being very uneasy when he tells his stories. It definitely seems like we caught him on a bad day. He's out of it from the moment we first see him. Here's his first line.
Ready, Captain?
Yes, sir. General. Kanan.
Love D. Bradley Baker's delivery of that. It seems like Rex was out of focus, like his mind was totally somewhere else. And then as the line goes on, I hear frustration in it, because, Rex is playing catch-up with that line. He's trying to get himself in the moment and out of the Clone Wars, and by the time he reaches Kanan, he sounds frustrated. It seems like this stems from the fact that this war isn't the same war he was built for. Oh god, I feel the clone crisis coming on. It's like, if there has to be a war, can it at least work the same way as before? The Clone Wars shaped who he was, man. He went right from, I don't know, birth into training into war. But it's more than that. The Clone Wars is what he was built for. He was programmed to fight in the Clone War, and frankly, the Republic didn't much care what happened to him beyond that. But now there's this new war. He's gone beyond the Clone War. The Republic didn't plan for this. There's a new war. And it's not the war he grew up in, not the war he was programmed for. Kanan is a Jedi, but not a general. He's just Kanan, you know? He doesn't even have a military rank as far as we know, because he does not want to be a part of the military on a fundamental level, which is not how things were in Rex's war. At all. I think Rex is frustrated with himself too, because times have changed and he's struggling to keep up with them. It's like, war is why he exists, so why can't he iron out all the details of this one? I'm probably overthinking it. I don't know, just something to consider. I also want you to notice Rex's face right before he says that line. He looks around at this Clone War graveyard they've landed on, and his demeanor just changes. He mentally goes to another place that looks upsetting for him. You even see him physically shake it off before Kanan addresses him. It's a great example of the creative team's impeccable attention to facial details and reactions, but besides that, it tells us a lot about how Rex is feeling. He'll have a flashback a few minutes after this, and researching flashbacks told me that sometimes you can feel it coming, or there's like signs that one might be coming, and I feel like this moment puts Rex on an anxious path that culminates in that flashback. It seems like Rex's relationship to the war is different all the time, and sometimes he looks back on it fondly and remembers friendship and adventure, but sometimes it haunts him and it sits cold and heavy in his soul, and it's my understanding that that's a realistic portrayal of someone coping with trauma. It's not a linear or a consistent thing. Everyone responds to trauma differently, and some days are worse than others. And then, go back to Rex talking with Ezra and Zeb. I want to point out Rex's reaction to Ezra saying that the droids don't look dangerous.
They don't look very dangerous.
Listen, those droids wiped out a lot of Republic troopers. Many of them were my friends.
Oh man, that line kills me. It feels like there's an implied many of them were my brothers, but like brothers is just too painful to say. To Ezra, this might seem like an overreaction. Rex is very on edge, serious, and defensive, but Ezra was just making a simple remark that he meant no harm by. Those of us who know better, though, realize that Rex is going through some stuff, and something as simple as Ezra's remark can really get to him. Which is one reason why, even though I joked about it earlier, I really do love the next line.
Rex has been through a lot. Battles leave scars. Some you can't see.
I'll talk more about this later, but I like that there's someone there who can explain to Ezra what's going on. More than that, though, I love that line because of the character development it shows in Kanan. The Bendu turned this man around. Full 180. The key, the identifying thing about Kanan's development is him stepping outside of himself. That's really it. And I have talked about this at least once in every season, but Kanan has historically had trouble seeing beyond his own distress and his own trauma. He'd always get saturated by his own grief and self-doubt, and it would cloud his reality. He had trouble extending understanding to others. So this is a huge testament to his character development. Not only does he recognize what Rex is going through based on personal experience, but he is extending understanding to the person who he was the most guarded against. The person who, unfortunately, triggered Kanan just by being there. There was a time when Rex was the last person who Kanan would ever try to empathize with, but he's evolved, and he recognizes that the differences he had with Rex did not come from a logical place, and that him and Rex are actually very much the same. And just to take that a step further, I find it interesting that the one thing Kanan originally perceived as dividing them, Order 66, is actually the thing that unites them. The clones weren't actual enemies any more than the Jedi were. They were all victims. It was a false division created by Palpatine to supplement his rise to power, which is actually what the entire war was, and this episode addresses that later. And I got all that from the first minute and a half of the episode. Wild. Just to give a break from the heaviness, let's appreciate the classic clanker humor this episode delivers.
We haven't captured anyone in years. We haven't captured anyone ever. The commander has initiated Battle Plan Zeta. Take your positions at once. Roger. Battle Plan Zeta? Finally.
Alright, you know the drill.
Greetings. Oh my god! I made it! Roger.
Wait, who's Roger?
Gotta love him. Well, that was a nice interlude, but now Rex has a flashback.
Where are we?
How intriguing. Well done, B-1268.
Roger.
Oh no. War. It's not over.
Rex.
Cody!
Talk to me.
Oh, Kanan. I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else.
This scene isn't done in like a really emotional or in-depth way or anything, but as someone who loves Rex and grew up with him, it's tough to see this and think about this. I really appreciate that this episode is giving us a look at Rex and PTSD and making it clear that this is a matter of mental health. It's not a groundbreaking and authentic deep dive into PTSD, but it's also indisputably showing us PTSD. It's there. It's there in Rex's seeming overreactions to stuff Ezra says. It's there in the fact that we watched Rex have a flashback. This is something that I definitely wanted to see addressed after the Clone Wars because Rex went through so much, and it leaves you wanting to know how he was affected. Even though he's a side character in Rebels, they still took this episode to explore that, and it's appreciated. It's appreciated. That is one thing that really makes Rebels stand out, how so much of the series really, specifically seems to be about mental health. It's in, specific ways that these characters deal with their pasts and respond to obstacles and support each other. And the support side is a very important aspect to all of this. Kanan's role in this moment is important too. I love that they put Kanan with Rex in this moment, and I appreciate how they had Kanan respond, given the very short amount of time they had to dedicate to this. They didn't have Kanan going snap out of it, or what's wrong with you? Kanan's immediate response is to say, talk to me, which actually helps to ground Rex. Now, it has been made pretty clear that Kanan also struggles with PTSD, so I appreciate that they have this moment of Kanan recognizing someone else's struggle based on his own experience, and then using his knowledge of that pain to help someone else. After his arc, spanning season 2 and then the beginning of season 3, that's something I definitely wanted to see from Kanan. I really value that Rebels has shown us two characters who show signs of PTSD. Rex and Kanan were both traumatized by the Clone War, but they didn't have the exact same experiences, and they don't react to their trauma in the same exact ways either. And I think it's important to show that. There is an air of support and solidarity between them, though, and overall, I think their relationship is one of the best parts of the show, and their development is honestly so underappreciated. Ready for some more Clone Crisis hours?
The tactical droid has had a long time to think about this. And remember, he wants to win.
I'm surprised it means so much to him.
Yeah, it means a lot to his programming. It means a lot to mine as well.
Your programming?
We clones were bred for combat. With few exceptions, there was no other way of life for us.
I hate this. I hate this so much. The clones being created for war and only war, while also being human beings, messes me up. It's so wrong for there to be no other way of life for them. They should have the right as human beings to have a purpose other than war. This is why there's a clone crisis. And the whole idea of programming, the drawing of parallels between the droids and the clones, it's the way that the clones were manufactured, as if they were droids and not human beings. How clones were viewed as expendable, as if they were droids and not human beings. It's the fact that we can draw parallels between clones and droids at all, as if clones are non-human beings. We should not be able to do that. We should not be able to talk about programming and all of that when we're talking about human beings. But the Republic commissioned the mass production of literal human beings, so here we are. I wish I could roast Sifo Dyas, but after reading Jedi Lost, I can't even do that anymore. Oh god, the clone crisis is so twisted and tangled and exhausting. Please, free me from this prison of my own creation. I will never be free. So, anyway.
I make a pretty good soldier, huh?
No. A good soldier follows orders.
I'm sorry, Rex. Good soldiers do what?
Good soldiers follow orders. Good soldiers follow orders. Good soldiers follow orders.
They do what? Anyway.
That plan was based on timing and execution, and you took too long.
But Chopper wanted to show me.
This is not a game. This is life and death. Every move you make affects the rest of us. If we're gonna survive this, we're gonna do it with strategy and discipline.
It's not you. He needs to finish this battle. His way.
Just like that droid.
So again, we're seeing how PTSD is affecting Rex. Right now it's manifesting as aggression toward Ezra. We haven't really gotten to see stuff like this from Rex before. Not like we did with Kanan anyway. Again, good on the writers for deciding to tell this story at all. I can't imagine how hard this is for Rex right now. I mean, he had a flashback and then immediately had to jump into this battle. This is the last thing he should have to do right now. I feel so bad for him. I like that they made it a point for Kanan to tell Ezra, it's not you. They made it a point to concretely make this psychological and like about mental health again. And I also feel like Ezra is learning a lot about why Rex and Kanan act the way they do. He observed Kanan's behavior in season 2, but I don't think he fully understood it, especially since a part of him was focused on how Kanan wasn't treating him very well, which was totally valid, rightfully so, but he didn't get why Kanan wasn't treating him very well. And I'm not even saying he should have, because that's not his job. I'm just saying that he didn't. But now Kanan is doing better, and because he understands his feelings better, he can now explain things about war and trauma to Ezra. It's a side of these mentor figures that I don't think Ezra has quite grasped or thought about. It's all war stories to him. I don't think the gravity of their reality ever truly sunk in for him. Like, you don't always realize just how human your parents are when you're young. Now he's getting more of an understanding of what Rex and Kanan deal with every day. Also, the part where Ezra goes just like that droid drives me wild. Again, it's the whole thing about being able to compare clones and droids. Clone Crisis Hours. And they keep doing it too! There's this line too!
That droid's too old.
Just like me.
That one brought age into it too. Like, I know Rex is getting old. Don't remind me. This is what I typed into my notes when I rewatched this. I'm having a crisis. Let's laugh at something. This part always makes me laugh.
What about the bombs we came here for?
We have no cannon to fire the shells. Otherwise, I would have used them on you.
Well, thanks.
My longtime fans will remember that this was a major personal meme of mine, but I had always misheard Kanan's line as "well thanks" and not "oh thanks," so now I present you with a new and improved and correct version of the meme. You're welcome. Okay, we're done laughing. Back to crisis time. This episode directly tackles the truth about the Clone War. Let's take a look at what it has to say.
I never really thought about it. I never asked. I know the Jedi were wiped out. The clones were decommissioned, and the droid army was just shut down. The Clone War ended, but why? If none of you won, who did?
The Empire.
Zed, that's right.
And then...
I think we face a common enemy now.
Wait a minute.
Let him finish, Captain.
Clones, battle droids, you destroyed each other, and when you were both weak enough, the Empire took over. General, what were the Separatists fighting for?
According to my programming, freedom from the tyranny of the Republic.
Fighting tyranny. Sounds like the Empire has always been your enemy.
You are against the Empire. I am against the Republic. Now, the Republic has become the Empire. I accept your logic. We are on the same side.
And that's it. Such a clear, concise summary of that mess. Good stuff. How crazy is it that we get this analysis of the Clone War in words, on screen, in a Star Wars property? Rebels was so worth it, guys. Rebels was so worth it. And it's really important to the story, too, because this revelation resolves the conflict. Ezra pointed out that they're on the same side, so the droids and Rebels worked together to fight off the Empire, who had attacked them, and ended the battle. Here's what the characters actually have to say about it.
We have survived the battle. It was not a victory, but a successful strategy nonetheless.
No, it was a victory. We all just won the Clone War. And you ended it, Ezra. A galaxy of senators couldn't do that. An army of Jedi, clones, and droids couldn't find the middle ground, but you did.
Rex, all I did was point out that none of you were meant to win. You couldn't.
And we needed to hear it.
Just hearing none of you were meant to win in words, man, gives me chills. It's just so bleak and awful. But it's also something of a comfort to Rex. I guess it's easier to accept a loss if you know the game was fixed from the beginning. At least you know it wasn't your fault in that case. There's still a lot to unpack as far as accepting how Palpatine used them and how they died for nothing, but this is still the closure that Rex needed, and probably Kanan too, even though we didn't get to see his feelings on the situation. Also, Ezra ended the Clone War, and he ended it by finding middle ground. Jedi moves right there. So funny that the Jedi with years of training and experience couldn't do that. Also, I think it's cool that Ezra has this little but significant imprint on the larger story. The Clone War is over, for all intents and purposes, so the end of this one straggling battle doesn't change anything, but you know what? Ezra still officially ended the Clone War. I love how the Rebels characters get sewn into the larger story in small but still important ways like that. Like how Kanan gave Obi-Wan the idea of directing Jedi away from the temple in case of an emergency. They just fill in the gaps. Writers find ways to give Rebels characters significance outside of Rebels that doesn't step on what's already been established, and I think that's cool. Oh, and another cool thing about that last conversation is it puts Rex at the Battle of Geonosis.
I can't imagine fighting that many droids all the time.
Well, if you think that was bad, let me tell you about the Battle of Geonosis.
I don't think that was ever confirmed before this, so there we go. Now we know. It's just like what I was talking about. Rex gets to have an imprint on a big event in the movies, but in a small way. And then, lastly, the best part of the episode. Oh, it's beautiful. Sometimes Rebels really is for the Clone Wars fans. People spent so much time hating it when parts of it were clearly made for the Clone Wars fans. I love this episode. It gives us a much-needed psychological look at Rex, it gives us a sense of closure about the Clone Wars, and it synthesizes the Clone Wars and Rebels really well. See, this is why I'm sick of comparing the Clone Wars and Rebels. I'm so sick of it. I don't think they were meant to be compared. I think they're two parts of one whole story. They enhance each other. They fit together. It's also a yin and yang type thing, tonally. It's like the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. The prequels were complicated and tragic. I mean, who doesn't cry at the end of Revenge of the Sith? But it's okay for it to end that way, because we all know that Vader gets redeemed at the end of Return of the Jedi. Same deal here. The Clone Wars had this thread of hopelessness and tragedy running under the surface, and the ending was just devastating. Nothing in Star Wars can end that hopelessly, as a rule, so Rebels completes the Clone Wars. Not only does it continue the stories of the characters, but it tonally completes it. It was the necessary companion to it, because the way that the Clone Wars ended and the way that the Clone Wars was tonally, just like, that can't... In Star Wars, it just can't be like that. There has to be a second half to a story like that. Again, prequels and originals, so like, they're meant to be companion pieces. Just stop comparing Rebels and the Clone Wars. I'm like literally so sick of it. That was a whole tangent I didn't mean to go on. I feel like that was a lot. I feel like that was so much. I'm so sorry I took up so much of your time. Thanks for watching. May the Force be with you always, and Merry Clone Crisis.